to start today by reading today's text over all of us, sort of straight through, and then I'll come back and I'll unpack it a bit. It's this text of this announcement. An angel visits a teenage girl named Mary. And maybe you've not grown up around the church at all, so this might not be familiar to you. And here's what I would encourage you to do then. Just let it sink in. Maybe just try and grab the enormity, the unbelievable wonder of this conversation, and even just try for a moment to put yourself in the place of this young teenage girl. And if you've grown up around the church, then this will be familiar to you. So here's what I want to encourage you. Just let it sink in. Maybe just try to grab the enormity of it, right? The unbelievable wonder of this conversation, and possibly just try to put yourself in the place of this young teenage girl. Because see, whether this is familiar or unfamiliar, whether you believe in God or whether you're still trying to figure out who God is, this announcement and the subsequent birth of Jesus Christ of Nazareth changed the world forever. So I'm going to pick up in Luke chapter 1, verse 26. In the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God to the city of Galilee named Nazareth, to a virgin betrothed to a man whose name was Joseph of the house of David. And the virgin's name was Mary. And he came to her and said, "Greetings, O favored one, the Lord is with you." But she was greatly troubled at the saying and tried to discern what sort of greeting this might be. And the angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary, because you have found favor with God, and behold, you will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus. He will be great, and he will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give to him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there will be no end." And Mary said to the angel, "How will this be, since I am a virgin?" And the angel answered, "The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Therefore, the child to be born will be called the Holy, the Son of God. And behold, your relative Elizabeth in her old age has also conceived a son. And this is the 6th month with her who was called barren. For nothing will be impossible with God." And Mary said, "Behold, I am the servant of the Lord. Let it be to me according to your word." And the angel departed. Last weekend, we kicked off the Christmas season with this series called Be Christmas. And we decided a while back that during this year's Christmas series, we want to sort of discover and maybe even rediscover those traditional, historical Christmas accounts that were captured by the gospel writers Matthew and Luke. And if you weren't here last week, part 1, Kent led us into the Christmas story through the eyes of Joseph. Folks, Mary, she's pledged to be his wife, and shockingly, she's found to be pregnant, and Joseph knows full well that he's not the father. It says that he goes on to quietly make plans to divorce her, but God had something different in mind, something challenging, extremely difficult, maybe even scandalous. He tells Joseph that he wants him, as planned, unheard of, to take Mary as his wife. God informs Joseph of something that was just frankly unbelievable, that Mary is going to become pregnant by the Holy Spirit, and the child is going to be the Son of God, that the hope for all nations will be born, and you are to name him Jesus. And though Joseph clearly, right, he must have had 1,000 questions and fears in his head. And though, like Kent told us last week, he had the right to do what he wanted, he surrendered his rights and he served God and Mary. Today in part 2, we'll look at Jesus' birth through the humble eyes of Mary, the wife of Joseph, mother of Jesus. Next week, we're going to follow the wise men as they go to find the baby Jesus. And part 4, Christmas Eve, the shepherds, right? Their curious sort of journey to find the Christ child. The teaching team has 2 goals in this series for us. The first is maybe just to help us rediscover the life, the richness, the depth of the Christmas story. You know, we all know the story, but we might not know it as well as we think we do. Secondly, though, we don't want you to just know the Christmas story. We want to help you live it out. We want to help all of us this year be Christmas. We've been using this as the sort of summary statement. We often hear the phrase, put Christ back in Christmas. Have we ever considered that in our efforts to win back the holiday, we may be part of the problem? What would it look like to put this Christmas, for us instead, to put Christ back in Christians? And then if you were here last week, we invited you to take what we called the Be Christmas Challenge with us, doing some practical things Monday through Friday to serve others each and every day. These challenges for this week, they're in the outline. You can use those, or you can just put your own ways in there to serve folks around you. At the end of the service, the campus leader will let you know that if you want these challenges and a daily devotional, we have a way that we can simply get these sent to your inbox every single day through this season. Folks, Mary's world was interrupted by a visit from an angel. Though an angel is probably not the source of your interruptions, we deal with interruptions all the time in our lives, don't we? Some of those interruptions are joy-filled, right? They could be a knock at the door, a surprise visit from a friend, a college student that gets a care package delivered to their room as they study for finals is a great interruption. I don't know about you, but I still bawl like a baby every single time I watch one of those videos or see one of those commercials of a well-planned surprise visit from a soldier, right? As he or she returns home and surprises spouse or kids. Incredible interruptions, joy-filled, right? But there are also unwelcome interruptions in our lives. Interruptions that could come as a knock at the door or a phone call delivering news that just sort of leaves us spinning. And Christmas, doesn't it seem to sometimes intensify the interruptions in our lives, right? If you break up with your girlfriend, it's lousy any time of the year, but it doesn't feel just a little bit worse at Christmas time. Being sick or losing a job, they're terrible interruptions. But sometimes they just feel like they carry a little bit of a heavier punch when it happens during the holiday season. Losing a loved one is brutal any time of the year. But at Christmas, doesn't it just feel a little more overwhelming? Folks, here's what I know. Interruptions in our lives are a reality. And so often they come completely out of nowhere and are not in our control at all. However, how we respond to them, how we process through them, and eventually move through them, it's on us. Again, Mary's world is interrupted by a visit from an angel. She is presented with a troubling, unbelievable, frightening interruption. Mary, the angel says, God has noticed you, and he's about to rest favor on you. And behold, you have been chosen by God to conceive his son. In 2012, if you were with us, we did a Christmas series called Behold. I don't know if anybody remembers that. We spent 4 weekends digging deeply into this incredible word, behold, that it's often used in the Bible, but we seem to seldom use it in today's conversations, right? Here's a picture that I saw of me preaching in that series, right? The big behold. On Facebook, one of our tech guys back in 2012, he thought this was a cute idea to put on Facebook. And we don't have either picture, do we? There it is. Yeah. So he's no longer with us. He's still alive and all. He's not part of the team. See, in that series, we explained that this word behold, it literally means look, don't miss this. Anybody remember that? This word behold, when you really look at the ancient language, it means look, don't miss this. This is very important. This is something you must know. This is urgent. The angel Gabriel, he comes to Mary and he says, behold, look, don't miss this. God's son will be conceived in you. He will be great and his reign will be for all and will be forever. You know, her world is drastically interrupted. And as I studied this, I see three responses that Mary had as she processed through this interruption. And I believe these responses apply deeply to our lives. When we are faced with something challenging or an overwhelming interruption, whether it is something that forces you to stop what you're doing in the moment, or whether it is something that might cause you to stop what you're doing for a season. Let's walk through these three responses that Mary had together. First, Mary's first reaction is fear, right? And I want to say something. I don't care how deep your relationship with God is or how rock solid your faith is. So often, one of our first reactions to a challenging interruption is we get scared, right? We are told that Mary is favored by God, that God notices her incredible faith, and of all the women that God could have chosen to deliver his son into the world, he chose her. So that leaves me to believe that her and God are pretty solid, right? She has a pretty solid faith. God knew she could handle this. Yet the angel Gabriel almost immediately has to say to her, don't be afraid. In this moment, Mary experienced fear. And folks, and when we receive a blindsiding interruption to our lives, it's very natural to become fearful. You know, have you recently, or do you maybe even sort of see one coming? Or are you currently in the throes of a really challenging interruption to your life? Maybe it's happened to you, or maybe it's happened to someone that you love dearly. Are you afraid? Man, I can't even imagine what was going on in Mary's head. An angel appears and says, greetings, and then drops this unbelievable announcement on her. She has to be somewhat spinning as she's trying to process what's happening to her. And the angel sees the look of fright in her face and says, don't be afraid. Folks, across all of our campuses, I hope that there's something for you in the rest of this sermon today. But for someone, or maybe a few of you, this might be all that you need to walk out of here with today. If you're in the midst of a frightening interruption in your life, hear this from God. Don't be afraid. You have found favor with God. Your interruption is not a punishment, and it will not destroy you. Folks, I'm not God, so I can't tell you the why behind your interruption, but I know if he interrupted you with it, then he's committed to walking through it with you. So, will you live in fear, or will you move forward in God's favor? See, from fear, Mary progressed to the second reaction, questions, right? She said, how can this be? I'm still a virgin. Of course Mary had questions, right? I mean, the reality is she's a 13 or 14-year-old girl that is being told that the Spirit of the Lord will come upon her and that she's going to become pregnant. I mean, she's a virgin. She's a poor girl from a small town in the middle of nowhere. She has the very real potential to lose her husband. And as Kent mentioned last week, she was betrothed to Joseph and is pregnant, and it's not Joseph's child. And in this day, at that time, that was a capital of offense, punishable by death. See, I think sometimes when we think of Mary's announcement, that came to her, we think of this majestic and peaceful and poetic conversation. But however, the reality is, this is frightening. And of course, she had questions. I mean, hear me on this. It's okay to have questions to God with unexpected interruptions that happen in your life. Folks, God's shoulders are broad enough to handle your questions. And here, I was going to sort of end it there and like move on to the third point. I'm just going to sort of leave it with like, Mary had questions, so of course it's okay for us to question God about the challenges and the interruptions in our life. Then I decided that I just couldn't leave it there. I decided I wanted to push a little, because that's sort of what I do. I felt like I wanted to add something to it. My mom told me that I was the kid that, growing up, that always had something to add. I would add, "That's not fair," right, at the end of the conversation, or "Just 5 more minutes, Mom." She told stories that every single time I would get spanked, I would leave the room saying, "That didn't hurt," right? It seems that's what I do. I like to add something. So let me add one more thing to this topic about questioning God and the difficult interruptions of our lives. Mary asked, "How will this be?" Understanding or full comprehension is a barrier often between us and God. Folks, if you're not a believer, then of course this is difficult to understand. How can this be? How could Mary become pregnant? How could God become a baby? How did this really happen, right? And if we are a believer, let's be honest, when God comes to us with something new or surprising, mysterious, uncomfortable, or a really challenging interruption, we often respond to, "Why would God do this? Why would God let this happen now? Why me, God?" See, I put this up on the screen here. I just want you to catch this. At the heart of pride is being a know-it-all. Pride is based in knowledge. If we believe we know it all, then we really don't need to know God at all, or at least not fully. Only God understands fully. God knew how and why Jesus would be born, and how and why his life would be fulfilled. And though throughout the ages, people constantly ask, "How will this be?" See, throughout the ages, God kept his cards close, and he continued to process his perfect plan. We see this continually throughout the life of Jesus. Jesus is born. His birth then is followed by about 12 years of silence. And then the boy Jesus appears in a temple teaching, but it's not his time. 18 or so more years of silence follows, and he appears at a wedding. And Jesus tells his mother Mary, it's not my time yet. 3 years of frenzy follow that end with a death on a cross. A final moment. It was his time for all of it to be fulfilled. After that, 3 days of silence followed by a resurrection and a victory over death. After that, 40 days of power witnessed by 500 plus, all focused on telling us the answer to Mary's question, "How could this be?" It could only be because God planned it all perfectly. The word "conceive" there that was used in the text, it means to seize or to take hold of. When the angel said that Mary, she will conceive, it means that her life will be seized by God. It will be taken hold of by God. Folks, some of us need to stop questioning the interruptions and simply allow God to take hold of our lives, even if we don't fully understand. Because if you think you can ever fully understand the things of God, then you are drowning in your own pride. Endless questioning will cause you to miss God. And sometime, and frankly, I think there's probably no better time of the year than Christmas, you simply need to let God take hold of your life. So I know I said one more thing, but I have one more thing to add. My mother is watching. She'd say, "Of course you do." One question I think that you should at least consider, right, that you should ask, and here it is. Is your interruption merely an interruption, or could it be an intervention? See, because I believe with all my heart, what most of us see as an interruption some of those times I believe that God sees as an intervention. Maybe God is pulling us out of a routine that we have placed ourselves in that we should never have been involved in, right? Maybe it's a routine of self-service or selfishness or self-loathing that God is divinely orchestrating an intervention. And we say in these times so often, God, what in the world? Like, I don't have time for this right now. This is way too much for me. What did I do to deserve this? And all the while, God might just be saying, walk with me. Trust me. Watch me do something amazing. Folks, the entire Christmas story is built on interruptions, right? That actually turn out to be holy interventions. Joseph, his life is interrupted with Mary being pregnant. And God intervenes and tells him not to divorce her because he has a better plan, right? The wise men, their lives are interrupted by a mysterious star that appears in the sky, causing them to travel west in search of a long expectant king. Herod, the king, his world is interrupted by wise men telling him of a king that's going to be born in Bethlehem. And the shepherds, they're just doing their thing, right? They're up on a hill just watching sheep. And they're interrupted by this host of angels announcing the birth of the Messiah. Each person's response to God's holy intervention, it allows them to be part of God's story. Maybe instead of being fearful of the interruption or questioning God's character in your interruption, maybe instead see it as God trying to get your attention. Maybe in order to protect you from something or to prepare you for something. Is your last or your current interruption quite possibly an intervention from God? Okay, one more thing. Now, my mother's right, but I have to add one more thing to this. Every person in this room, across all of our campuses, has been an interruption to someone. At many points along the way, you have been an interruption to your parents. Some of you right from the start, an unplanned interruption, right? Right? You were an interruption to a teacher, to a youth leader, to a coach, to a mentor. You have been an interruption to your roommate, to your friends, to your spouse. Aren't you grateful that some of those folks decided to embrace the interruption of you? I'm so grateful for Bill and Janice Edwards, the youth leaders that I met when I was 17. They embraced my interruption into their life and led me to Christ. I'm so grateful for every coach that put a little extra time in, for every teacher whose classroom I continually interrupted, for every boss that put up with my stubborn interruptions as I learned how to lead. Maybe God desires to use you to intervene in someone's life that has interrupted your routine, your planned, organized, busy little world. If my mom is watching this on video, thank you, Mom, for always putting up with my challenging interruptions. So what's the third thing that Mary does? She humbles herself and she embraces the interruption. When you decide to follow God's plan instead of yours in your life, they're going to be full of interruptions. It's the truth. Look at the Old Testament. Just look at Moses and Joshua or Gideon in the New Testament. Just look at Paul or any of the disciples. Look at any of those in the Christmas narrative. If you decide to follow God passionately, following God is a series of interruptions. Did you ever think about this? How long was this conversation between the angel and Mary, right? You ever think about that? Was it as brief as the time taken for me to just read those dozen verses or so? Or did this take all night? Did Mary sit still for long periods of time and think and maybe even cry? Did she pause? Did she ask other questions that aren't recorded? Like, what is Joseph going to think? Why have you chosen me? How am I going to tell my parents. I don't know if she asked other questions. I don't know how long this conversation lasted, but what I know, what I love, is how Mary ended the conversation. She said, behold. And that's that word. It's almost like she turned to the angel and said, look, don't miss this. I've got something important to say to you. I am the servant of the Lord. Let it be to me according to your word. Here's what I know for sure. Folks, it's not our circumstances, the gifts that we're going to receive this year. It's not time off from work that's going to give us joy in this Christmas season. It is humility. It is humbling ourselves before the heart of God. It is when we say, let it be according to your word. I am your humble servant. Humility is saying it's not about me or my circumstances or my problems or my family's problems. This season is not about me. It's about the Lord, right? We are celebrating the birth of Christ, and so often I think we forget to invite him to the party. Why did God choose Mary? Because Christ enters and occupies the place of humility. Mary was humble, and she responded to the interruption with humility. The times in my life when I have been closest to God is one, when I have humbled myself before him, or two, when he has stepped in and humbled me, period. Humbling circumstances bring us closest to God. One way or another, God desires for you to enter into his presence. So, you can either get humble or get humbled. Proverbs 3:34 says this, to the humble, he gives favor. Let me just throw in summary here, just a bunch of stuff that I've sort of talked with you about, and see if one of them is what you need to leave here with today and head in to Christmas. I would pray that this Christmas, if you have a holy interruption, that you follow that interruption by declaring, behold. Okay, let it be. Bring it on, God. I am your humble servant. Through me, I would be humbled to reveal your love to the world through the interruption that you've placed in my life. Maybe for you, it's just whatever's going on in your world right now, don't be afraid. Maybe for you, it's ask questions, but understand that needing to understand everything is pride. Maybe for you, it's consider whether or not this interruption in your life is actually an intervention. Maybe for you, consider whether what's going on in your world to someone that you know is actually God asking you to intervene on his behalf for someone. And then lastly, just what's the best way to be Christmas? Be humble. Seek humility. People will search you out and want to know you and want to know your God. Across all of our campuses, I want your campus leader to step up now. Close your service.